Hi, this is the New Year Review. We're back again today with another reading of Bearing the Cross, my 1 year community read. Now, I do these in 30-minute increments. Sometimes I may go like a minute over, but I really try to stay at 30. So, where we left off there, where did we leave off? Where we left off, where they're not really, the author is highlighting King's, um, his youth and his college, um, his, um, his younger years. So he talked about his, what I am getting all tongue tied, but he's really highlighting King's earlier life and how he became the young man he was. Also, indicating and addressing some of the traumas that he dealt with um, as he was growing up with racial. I want to say racial ambiguity, um, and various times of his life and how he felt and how he dealt with it and how he decided to not hate an entire group of people because of a few bad apples. And so this is King coming of age, and he's also decided, through his studies that between law and ministry, that he's choosing ministry. So we're gonna talk about the principle, the quasi principle Nia, which is purpose. Like, I am purposefully sharing this with you guys online as King purposefully um, found his calling in life. And his calling in life, he said he chose it was ministry was inescapable, and in the urge to serve society, and he felt a sense of responsibility. And so when I saw that part, I'm like, you know what, that's how I feel. I feel a sense of responsibility to share these type of readings with communities. So let's continue. That's where we left off at. And so what we're reading right now is an explanation written a few years later. King spoke of his decision as follows. I had felt the urge to enter the ministry from my latter high school days, but accumulated doubt had somewhat blocked the urge. Now I appear again with a inescapable drive. My call to the ministry was not a miraculous or supernatural thing. On the contrary, it was an inner urge calling me to serve humanity. Mm. I guess the influence of my father also had a great deal to do with my going into the ministry. This is not to say that he ever spoke to me in terms of being a minister, but that my admiration for him was the great moving factor. He set forth a noble example that I didn't mind following. And this is King, reflecting like, this didn't come just out of nowhere. Because when I think about it, um, all of these things happened, and the influence of his father did had a lot to do with him choosing to do ministry, because he saw how ministry um, has allowed his father, you know, to influence how he looked at humanity as a whole. So that's yeah. I always have to look at that quote, when I read this book. So it's a good one. Okay, so let's continue. Let's continue reading. By mid-April, King had accepted Crozer's offer of admission, and several months after his June graduation from Morehouse, King left Atlanta to begin 3 years of study in Chester, Pennsylvania. Crozer was a very small school few with fewer than 100 students, including more than a half a dozen blacks. King lived in the main dorm and spent most of his time copying with coping with a heavy workload. King's academic performance at Crozer's was far superior that to that at Morehouse, although his first year average suffered because of several C's. Principally in two public speaking courses, King made consistent progress, getting nothing below a B in his second year and straight A's in his third. He impressed his instructors and fellow students both in the classroom and out. He made many friends amongst them two white students from Georgia, Dupree Jordan and Francis Stewart, and an older black from Georgia, Dupree Jordan, and an older black classmate, Horace Ed Whitaker. In his spare time, King played billiards, card games, or went bowling with his old friend from Morehouse, Walter McCall, who had come to Crozer's one semester after him, a good friend of the King family, and Reverend J. Pius, Joe Barber, and Morehouse graduate, who had attended Crozer, at first recommended the school to King. Lived only 2 miles from the campus, and ML was a frequent visitor. He enjoyed the cooking, the opportunity to argue about politics and race, and the chance to listen to prize fights. Barber took an interest in all the black students at Crozer's and frequently counseled Little Mike on a variety of topics. Barber was like a father to all of us, Ed Whitaker recalled, and the intellectual jousting with Barber was an enriching experience. King, in particular, would challenge him, and they would have quite a debate. Barber dialogues, Whitaker thought. Were more well, let me go back. Okay, so I said Barber dialogues, Whitaker thought, were most stimulating than their classes, and for King they sharpened his philosophy views in many ways over and above being in seminary. Only a few troubles marred King's 3 years at Crozer's. Several months after arriving, he and Jordan went into nearby Philadelphia together. We went to the Stouffer's restaurant right there in downtown, Jordan later remembered, and he was ignored there for 20 or 30 minutes. Finally, he demanded services, and we got service. Unfortunately, in one of his vegetables that he was served, he had sand on his plate. Jordan and King, Jordan and King were both just outraged by that, but King's overall reaction seemed surprisingly subdued to Jordan. He took it rather quietly and did not want to make demands that would make a scene. King also reacted relatively coolly a few months later when a Southern white student, Lucius Z. Hall Jr., who had been victimized by a dorm room prank, blamed King for the trick and threatened him with a pistol. Hall and King had previously had some little clashes. Marcus Wood, an older black student, later recalled. But on this occasion, Hall bursted into King's room, gun in hand. I was in the room, Wood explained. I saw the gun, and King was scared. Wood intervened and tried to calm Hall down. I got him out of the room and back and back to his own. King declined to bring any charges, and no disciplinary actions were taken against Hall, who left Crozer at the end of the academic year. King's calm reaction to the incident was respected by his fellow students. That emotional maturity, plus King's superior academic record, heavily influenced King's subsequent election as student body president. Hmm. I'm doing, I would like to interject here, but I think I'm, entering a flow. So I hope you guys are enjoying the read. And if you have any questions or any comments, please, you know, um, leave them for me and I will get to them in future videos. All right, so let's get back to this. Towards the end, King's first year at Crozer, incidentally involving a gun, took place. King McCall, King McCall and their dates had traveled from Chester into nearby New Jersey and stopped at a restaurant in Maple Shade. Outside of Camden, the white proprietor refused to serve the foursome, and they choose to remain seated. The owner became furious, pulled a gun, threatened them, and finally ran outside, firing a pistol once in the air. With that, the group chose to leave, and McCall sought out a policeman, with whom they returned to the establishment. McCall pressed charges, and the three white student witnesses initially agreed to testify against the owner. Paternal pressure later changed their minds. Out, and to King's and McCall's dismay, the matter had been dropped. King dated regularly during his Crozer years, but one of his companions, a white girl of German origin whose mother worked for Crozer's, raised concern for the eyes of Barbara and other friends. Barbara heard about the couple's serious romantic involvement, and King, in no uncertain terms, of the difficulties an interracial relationship would face. King refused to reconsider the liaison. He and the girl were in love with each other and even had talked about marriage. King's closest friends, like Ed Whitaker, knew of the couple was very serious and considered the girl a lovely young woman. But second Barbara's stern advice, if King wanted to return to the South to pastor, as he often said, an interracial relationship, an interracial marriage will create severe problems in the black community as well as the white. Another black student, Serial Powell, put it more bluntly. I told him it was a dangerous situation and it could get out of hand. And if it did get out of hand, it would affect his career. Barbara insisted that King that marrying the young woman would be a tremendous mistake and urged both of them to reconsider. Finally, after 6 months' involvement, the couple took the advice of King's friends and ended their relationship on amicable but painful terms. King, Barbara said years later, was a man of a broken heart. He never recovered. Neither love affairs nor the pistol incident interrupted King's new commitment to academic excellence and intellectual curiosity. Walter McCall observed that the dramatic change came in him when he entered the seminary. he began to take his studies more seriously. He devoted his time to his books day and night. Dupree Jordan agreed. He was very studious. He spent a lot more time with his lesson assignments than most of us did. King also pursued intellectual topics outside the classroom, such as attending a lecture that a well-known pacifist, A.J. Musk, gave at Crozer in early 1949. Musk and King got into a pretty heated argument. Francis Stewart later remembered, King sure as hell wasn't any pacifist then. Oh boy. Stimulated by a philosophy course he was taking at the University of Pennsylvania, King devoted much of his Christian holiday that year to a close reading of Marx, regarded as a gifted speaker by his classmate. King chose Christianity and communism as one of his subjects when Stewart invited him to address a white Baptist woman group at a Chester church. Most of us are not capitalists. We're just potential capitalists, King told the audience. From the day, from the womb to the womb to the tomb. Yes, there is potential, right? All of us are potential capitalists. I will meet you at the fork of the road with your decision. Okay, let's get back to reading. Okay, you guys, we're almost done. King particularly blossomed during his third and final year at Crozer. 1950 to 1951, Professor George W. Davis was with whom King took 34 of his 110 course hours, was especially impressed with King's development. In a December 1950 evaluation, Davis wrote, 1. Exceptional intellectual ability, discriminating mind. 2. Very personable. 3. Make good impression in public speaking and discussion. Good speaking voice. 3. A man of high character. 4. A man of good high character. And 5. Should make an excellent minister or teacher. He has the mind of the latter. King made a similarly positive impression as a young instructor with whom he studied, Kenneth L. Smith, who lived on the same dorm floor as King. Smith, like others, felt that King had a certain reserve about him, which made him different to get close to. But the two men talked regularly about intellectual subjects. We're doing good here, you guys. We're doing good here. Not so much commentary, but yeah, I'm just enjoying the read, and I hope that you're enjoying it too. King reserves and intellectual focus hindered him in a bi-monthly student pastorship assignment he held during the fall of 1950 at the First Baptist Church of Elmhurst in Queens, New York. Assigned to the church because its senior deacon was a King family friend, and because its newly called pastor, Rev William E. Gardner, needed an interim assistant. King drove up from Chester on Saturdays and returned on Sunday evening. Although church ladies such as Mrs. Matilda Sims found him marvelous and brilliant, Pastor Gardner gave King a B for pulpit ability and highlighted several shortcomings in an evaluation requested by Crozer. An attitude of aloofness, disdain, and possibly snobbishness, which prevent him coming close grips with the ranks and files of ordinary people. Although a smugness that refuses to adapt itself to the demands of ministering effectively to the average Negro congregation. And I want to say this because I find this attitude with most ministers, and I may offend some people, but I find most ministers to be more aloft, above, their parishioners or whatever it is. But is that something that they learn in seminary school? Um, you have to have a certain distinction about yourself, be confident about yourself, but also be compassionate. So I'm not a witness. This is just based on what he saw. And then sometimes, um, I'm assuming by him being so young and being, how can I say, by him being young and confident in his walk and in his purpose, that can be off-putting, to some people who probably chose to be in this field because there were no other options, and this was his options. Now, one thing they don't do is go over the background of Pastor Gardner, and that would be something I'll be curious to understand, like what was his past, what, how, how did he get to where he was at? Because that's also telling. Okay, and how he accepts, mentoring younger pastors or new pastors. Well, let me finish. At Croser's, however, King's intellectual focus was most appropriate. Beginning with his first course under George Davis, King was impressed with the writings of Alter uh, Rubnishin. I can never get that name right. The social gossip theologian of the 20th century. A okay, Rauschenbach, a social reformer who held pastorates in New York City, had argued that religion must be relevant to the world problem and that the church should be actively involved. Isn't that something, you guys? His writings also emphasize a very optimistic, view of society's chances for progress and man's possible perfectibility. King attracted to Rauschenbach's call for social activism, but wholeheartedly adopted his optimism as well. That attraction, King admitted, was not simply a matter of abstract preference. It is, he wrote at the same time, quite easy for me to lean more towards optimism than pessimism about human nature, mainly because of my childhood experiences. It is it is quite easy, he added, for me to think of the universe as basically friendly. And that's beautiful that, like he has resolved with himself that not everybody, not everyone of a different race have um, poor intent, right? Excuse me, you guys. Sometimes it's hard to really focus on that when there's so much hatred, um, that that people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis and racial tension, especially here in this current day of United States. But United States has always been racist, you guys, and I don't care what people like think that racism is over. I think we are now seeing that um, how race destroys, um, everyone, because who's winning? No one wins from hatred. Okay. So let's get back to this because I'm almost finished. I'm going to stop at the bottom of this page right here, and then the next recording I will pick up from here. King held King held those views until he encountered the writings of Reinhold Niebuhr. During his senior year course with Kenneth Smith, Niebuhr was a favorite of Smith's and one of the sharpest critics of Rauschenbach's optimism. Niebuhr believed that Rauschenbach's emphasis upon the power of Christian love to advance the cause of social justice was misplaced and naive. And I mean that it did not measure adequately the power and the persistence of man's self-concern, man's man's selfishness. Niebuhr had stressed in a book, 1932, "Moral Man and Immoral Society" was the major barrier to justice in society. The men in privileged groups were the most persistent in obstructing any effort to improve society. Let me read that again, okay? It says, men in privileged groups were the most persistent in obstructing any efforts to improve society. What's that remind you of? What we currently got going on right now. So I don't want to age this, so let me continue. Disproportion of power in society is the real root of social injustice, and I always believe that. I underline that. So yes, Niebuhr argued that economic power is more basic than political power. I've always said that, you guys. Economic power, and this is why I believe boycotting is effective, because you choosing not to emerge your capital to make someone else's rich, or to build someone else's empire, is powerful. The boycott that they are exercising is powerful. So boycotting works. Because of these persistent inequalities, relations between groups must therefore always be predominantly political rather than ethical. Social gossip thinking was blind to these painful truths about modern society. So I am so happy, like it's not even 30 minutes yet, but I'm going to end there because I did go over a couple of them. So I'm going to end there, but we will go over this, like read, like to get some points, hit some points about this. I mean, I'm sorry. I will address some of the points that he made in the next recording. And so my takeaway from this is that King is now in the process of, really getting a schooling, right, of where he wants to be, how he wants to be perceived, and he's really challenging himself on various philosophies. And so I think that is beautiful to see the transformation of not just, getting an education from one place, but to be challenged on some of the things that you believe, do not believe, or just do not understand. And that is the beauty about higher learning and self-improvement. So in saying that, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm going to see you guys in my next recording episode. Have a beautiful day wherever you are, everybody.